Today, joining us is Mr. Jules Boykoff, who played for the U.S. Under 23 men's soccer team and who's now a professor of political science and the author of 8 books, two of which are for the politics of soccer, one called Kicking, a memoir about his life, and the other, the now released, newly released in May 2026, a book called Red Card, specifically about the 2026 World Cup happening next week. Now, we're filming this on June 4th. The World Cup actually starts on my birthday, June 11th. So we actually don't know yet what's going to be happening when we release this to you guys, but we'll still be discussing it. I think we have Mr. Boykov has things to say regardless. But Mr. Boykov, thank you so much for joining the Unsalty podcast. Welcome.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, as you see, I'm wearing my Egyptian jersey. Obviously, I'm American, but, my origins from Egypt. And this is the first time I don't watch soccer. I don't really watch sports, but the only time I tune in, and many people around the world tune in to a sporting event, is for the World Cup or the Olympics. It's the only time where, you feel like this sense of unity. I Show Speed came out with this amazing song, and I got goosebumps listening to it. When you listen to, like, what's that other one? I was actually just listening to it before we came on because I was feeling, you feel the spirit of the World Cup, the waving flag, when I get older, I will be stronger, right? Those are such impactful, memorable things in your life as a child and as an adult. And so my question to you is, as someone who has, been critical of these events, I get this question a lot. So I want to ask you, why be critical of such a happy event?
I think that's a great place to start because we get pinned as spoil sports or people that are trying to ruin other people's fun. But I think it's a great place to start also because it's so true that the World Cup brings the world joy. It brings the world camaraderie. It brings the world community. It strengthens community. And that's a beautiful thing. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've experienced it myself over the course of my life. But along comes FIFA, the global governing body for football or soccer, and they are taking the people's game, the most popular sport in the world, and they're essentially turning it into a game for the super rich, the plutocrats game, just about. And so, from my perspective, it's worth fighting against those people at FIFA that are trying to basically steal the people's game and turn it into something totally different, monetizing it for their own political advantage and leaving the rest of us behind in certain ways. So I think that's a good place to start. I love soccer. I want to make that clear from the outset. Spent a lot of time in my life playing it and also cheering on other people that are playing it. But I think we're at an inflection point right now when it comes to this World Cup and what it means for the wider world.
Hmm. So who even runs FIFA? I've never even understood how this is a governing body.
Well, right now, the president is a man named Gianni Infantino, and beneath him, there's something called the FIFA Council. It's a very powerful group of around 37 people run by Infantino. Those 37 people, I think is probably worth noting, make between $250,000 and $300,000 a year for attending between 2 and 4 meetings. And so when you're getting paid that much to do so little, you kind of have an incentive to go along with the flow. If Infantino wants to try this, oh yeah, sure, go for it. Beyond those 37 people, every country that has a football association has a spot in FIFA, and they get to vote on things like the World Cup. They also receive funding from FIFA, and this is another thing that kind of leads to this somewhat clientelistic patronage network where Infantino and the FIFA Council give out these millions of dollars to these football associations around the world, and they tend to, in exchange, stay loyal to his project and basically do what he says. So you have basically kind of a legalized field of corruption in front of you with FIFA. It used to be in the days, I'm sure many people listening to us right now remember only a decade ago where there was this massive corruption. Those were the days of like money stuffed into a manila envelope or a suitcase or a briefcase. Those days are largely gone as far as we know. It's really above board legalized corruption, as I say. But yes, the most powerful world governing body for sport in FIFA, and they'll be front and center this summer at the World Cup.
Hmm. So are you saying back when you used to play, first of all, when did you play? It was FIFA was good. It didn't have this kind of corruption, and now we're at a unique point of corruption?
So I played when I was playing for the under 23 men's national soccer team that you mentioned at the outset. That was the late 80s, early 1990s. And so what I'm definitely not saying is that FIFA was much cleaner at that point. In fact, I would argue that you had a similar patronage type network, a clientelistic kind of situation, but a lot of it was illicit payments to broadcasters, to sponsors, and to members of FIFA themselves. We don't know a lot of what happened, but we're talking that those were the days of suitcases of cash. Let me give you an example. There was a guy that was a big dog in CONCACAF, so that's the regional soccer body for North America, Central America, the Caribbean. This guy was named Chuck Blazer, and at one point, Chuck Blazer had an $18,000 a month penthouse in Trump Tower, and adjacent to his $18,000 a month penthouse, he had a $6,000 a month penthouse for his cats. Okay, that's the kind of life that these guys were living. That was the suitcase of cash era. Of course, I had no idea what was happening because I was running around the soccer field representing the United States at age 19. But I did start to figure things out a little bit over time. So I'm definitely not saying things are getting better. In a weird way, they might almost be worse under Infantino because everyone thinks it's so above board.
Hmm. $16,000 a month for his cats? For an apartment?
Yeah, 6,000 a month for his
Six.
cats, 18 for himself. So yeah, his cats were living the good life, a lot better than a lot of other New Yorkers, I might say, at that time.
Oh, I mean, yeah, these rich people are complaining about Mamdani. Look at that. I mean, the cats need to pay their fair share of taxes as well, it looks like.
I like
Man,
that.
Trump, we really thought we were voting against the deep state there. This man is in every single deep state story as you go through life. It's crazy. Assalamu alaikum. You've heard the lectures on riba. You know it's a problem, but no one's ever given us a solution. That's exactly why I'm partnering with Dr. Rami, a successful dental surgeon and the founder of My Debt Clinic. The Debt Clinic is removing hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt every single day and bringing debt relief to millions across the nation. Whether it's credit card debt, personal loans, or private student loan, the consultation is completely free, no upfront fees. And here's what I love about them. They don't just help individuals. They support masajid and humanitarian organizations in the United States and all across the world. This is a company that actually shares our values. Don't suffer in silence. There are brilliant Muslims out there trying to serve this ummah, and Dr. Rami is doing exactly that. So if you've been burdened by debt, then take the first step today. Visit mydebtclinic.com/Ansari and speak to a debt doctor. And when you reach out, let them know that Ansari sent you. Assalamu alaikum. And now a quick message from our sponsors. Provision Capital is a Sharia-compliant real estate firm built on trust, scale, and purpose, with investments in residential real estate all across the United States, and their focus is ethical investing. Provision Capital has a historical annual track record for the past 10 to 15 years. Visit provisioncapital.com and join over 400 investors nationwide to begin ethically investing your money today. Invest in Provision Capital today and invest in an ethical future. You know, I know you're famous for talking about sports washing. It's actually one of the things you discuss in your new book, Red Card, Sports Washing, the concept of governments and politicians using sports to cover for whatever political actions they want to take. What's interesting here is I think the opposite may be happening or is going to happen in the United States, where this may be the pin in the coffin for our reputation, for our soft power. I'm afraid, or I'm anticipating that when the rest of the world, all around the world, comes to the United States for the first time, when before it would have been much harder for them to come, and they see the reality of how the United States looks. They see the graffiti, they see the inner cities, they see the metros. All of that Hollywood for years, decades goes out the window. And if our people, if the American people, like you're saying, don't treat them right, then that will just uglify the United States even more. We may completely lose our soft power around the global stage, which honestly, Hollywood and our soft power seems to be the only thing we're holding on to at this point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, I mean, maybe I can just start by kind of offering my definition of sports washing and then respond to your incisive comment there. For me, sports washing is when political leaders use sports to try to appear important or legitimate on the world stage while deflecting our attention from chronic social problems, from human rights problems at home, and setting up deals for political, economic, diplomatic gain down the road. And it's a term that's often been used against places like Russia or Qatar. And people say, oh, that's sports washing. And I agree that that was happening in those countries. But they don't often use it for places like the United States. And that's why my book that you mentioned, Red Card, is somewhat moving in a different way. I do argue that it's happening in the United States. Now, to your question, when people ask whether sports washing works, they usually mean, does it work on an international audience? Does it have that international audience start buying into the soft power of the hosting country? And that can happen. Like, look, Qatar actually benefited quite tremendously from hosting the World Cup. Their tourism numbers are up. They have become a diplomatic powerhouse in the region. They already were before, but that only become stronger afterwards. But I think it's also important to remember that it's not just about the global audience when you think about, does sports washing work? It's also about a domestic audience. And President Trump has been using sports to his political advantage domestically for a long time. Quite honestly, I think the ship has sailed on President Trump's reputation abroad. And I think you're exactly right. There's going to be fans that get to the United States right now and see it in total disarray. Although I'm also hoping that a lot of people make a special effort to welcome fans from outside to say that, look, not the entire country here is MAGA land. But so the domestic component for Trump is really important. The worst, so if it's about deflecting attention, what is Trump trying to deflect our attention from? I mean, we could make a list that would last like the rest of the show. I mean, the Epstein files, his terrible approval ratings lower than ever in both of his terms, the terrible way that the Iran war is happening alongside Israel. Even it looks like there's tension with Israel now and Trump. He wants to deflect attention from all that, look important on the world stage. And he has a very strong track record of doing that. Ahead of the midterms, this is especially important because he can look important, kind of cool around these athletes and maybe try to turn around this ship in the United States and make advances in terms of the election coming up in November. So it could be more, for me, for this domestic, the sports watching situation with Trump is more about the domestic situation than it is about convincing anybody internationally.
Yeah, let's hope Messi stops helping Trump in these kind of situations. I know my boy Ronaldo won't be.
Hmm.
Um, who- what are your thoughts on Russia being banned from the 2026 World Cup and not Israel?
I think it's a really interesting situation. And it's not just FIFA, the world governing body for soccer, but it's also the International Olympic Committee who did the same thing. They banned Russia. They've been outside of the Olympic circle for a long time. And it was interesting because, for starters, both of those organizations, FIFA and the International Olympic Committee, they often say that they don't engage in politics. We're neutral. But they definitely read the political scene there and they boxed out Russia. A lot of people, including yourself right now, are raising, well, wait, why doesn't that also apply to countries like Israel? I think we could also add the United States to that list, quite honestly. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get really specific about it, it's a double standard. FIFA has a double standard when it comes to Russia and Israel. I'll take it one by one if I can, because I want to be specific about this. The International Olympic Committee banned Russia for two reasons. One is that they took over territory inside of Ukraine and were running sport clubs there. So that was against the International Olympic Committee's charter. The second reason that they did was because they broke the Olympic truce, this kind of fairy tale idea that you're supposed to stop wars for this period that brackets the Olympics. The United States never did that, of course, during the Iraq War and Afghanistan War, and it never got banned or anything like that. So it's, again, selectively applied. You take those two standards and you apply them to Israel with the Olympics. Well, they were already taking over territory in the West Bank and creating sporting clubs there, including football clubs. And so that's a clear violation. That's the exact same thing that Russia got banned for. Now, they didn't break the Olympic truce per se, not at least until the Olympics start. But once they did, they didn't exactly slow down the attacks on Gaza or the West Bank. And so they basically did the same thing. So that is a good question. I mean, why weren't they banned? A lot of people think that they very much should have. Move over to FIFA for a second and Gianni Infantino. And there were two really important rulings with FIFA recently on a couple cases involving Israel. One was that Israel's taken over all this territory in the West Bank where they've been running football clubs, a clear violation of FIFA statutes. And in their ruling, FIFA said, you know what? This is a really complex issue. We can't get involved in this, which is ridiculous because there's plenty of international law at hand. It's pretty well settled that these are illegal settlements in these territories in the West Bank. And so that was just basically an abdication of their responsibility. The other ruling involved a club called Beitar Jerusalem FC, who has a number of ultras or really fanatical fans who are absolutely racist and horrible people who at their matches chant things like quote death to Arabs, and there's a lot more that I'm not going to go into that they do. It's horrific. And so the Palestinian Football Association brought a claim to FIFA. FIFA ruled this. They said, you know what? You're right. They do that stuff. They do those horrible chants. So what's going to be their penalty? They're going to get a $150,000 Swiss franc penalty, which is like nothing to the Israeli Football Association. They're going to get a warning, whatever that means. And at the next three official matches, Israel has to fly a banner that reads "Football unites the world" and don't discriminate next to the Israeli Football Association logo. So basically, a big nothing burger of a penalty for engaging in massive, horrific actions by Beitar Jerusalem fans. And so that's why when you saw recently, I'm sure some of your listeners and viewers will remember the when Gianni Infantino was in Vancouver and he tried to sort of create this kumbaya moment with the head of the Israeli Football Association and the head of the Palestinian Football Association, a guy named Jibril Rajoub. And he was like, you wanted to get them together for this photo op. And Rajoub's like, no, he was not going to stand next to this Israeli guy for a photo op to benefit Gianni Infantino. So that's kind of the long answer to your question, but I think it's a complex question and an important one that deserves a lot of empirical information, a lot of facts. And I think it's a situation rooted in injustice right now.
Yeah, and right now they're conquering land in Lebanon, which is they have no claim to. Yeah, they argue all the other places, but Lebanon, you got a
Mm,
claim to now. That should at least be a clear trigger. But
mm.
obviously we know that yeah, as you were saying that FIFA gave a prize to Trump, and Trump and Netanyahu are tied at the hip, and they just created this prize out of thin air, this FIFA Peace Prize. I don't even know why they gave it to him, just so he can what? Why'd they even give him this prize?
Yeah, well, for starters, it was really weird. We were talking before about the FIFA Council, this sort of high power group of 37 people at FIFA. Many of those people didn't even know about this until they read a press release about it in public. So this was definitely Infantino's thing. He gives Trump this award. He's long been kissing up to Trump. I mean, he's obsequious at the molecular level, pretty much, this guy Gianni Infantino. I'll say this about him. I think Infantino massively miscalculated in giving him the award in December ahead of the tournament. If he was smart, Infantino, he would have waited and he would have said, I'm going to give out this FIFA Peace Prize at the end of the tournament. And that would have said to Trump, kind of sneakily, if you're on your best behavior, you're probably going to get this peace prize. So be good, if you will, during the tournament. But instead, he kind of blew that strategy by giving it to him ahead of time, giving Trump what he wanted. And so
Mhm.
Trump has a lot of power right now, and he seems to have Gianni Infantino there to pretty much do wherever he wants. I'll say one last thing just for comparison, if I may, about this is that, right before the Qatar 2022 World Cup, 2 days before, in fact, the people running the World Cup there said that they were not going to allow beer in stadiums, which was news to FIFA, especially because Budweiser has like this massive sponsorship of like $75 million sponsorship with FIFA. But FIFA went along with it, even though they had that massive sponsorship. And that just goes to show that Qatar had a lot of power over this powerful entity of FIFA right before the World Cup started. Because what are they going to do? Relocate games at that point? Absolutely not. And so I say all that to say this. Donald Trump has a ton of power right now when over FIFA because of the fact that they're not moving games out of the United States at this late stage, and God knows what he could possibly do with that kind of power. But I think the FIFA Peace Prize that you mentioned is emblematic of President Gianni Infantino's willingness to kiss up to President Donald Trump at pretty much every opportunity. I mean, I do think it's probably fair to also point out that Infantino has a long track record of kissing up to people running the Men's World Cup. I mean, he was buddies with Vladimir Putin back in 2018. He played football on the Red Square out in front of the Kremlin then in 2018 ahead of the tournament. Infantino actually moved to Qatar to run interference to sort of diminish the amount of attention that was going to the deaths of immigrant workers and to get ready for that World Cup. And then, of course, now with Trump, though, he's taking it to the next level. He's actually relocated to Florida, 70 miles down the road from Mar-a-Lago. He also actually at FIFA reportedly rents from Trump Towers in New York City. So like you say, it always does kind of come back to Trump. So with Infantino and Trump, I mean, he's really kind of taking it to the next level.
Hmm. What do you think about ticket pricing? I just saw there's reports of early matches in cities like Toronto, Boston, and San Francisco that aren't even sold out yet.
Mhm.
So I think you have this claim, and it does seem to be quite obvious that FIFA is slowly pricing out the working class. But why would they do that? Isn't that where they make all their money?
In theory, well, they certainly, that's where the zest and spirit and excitement around the World Cup comes from. All the diehard fans that are coming from around the world and all their garb and everything. And that's part of the fun. When they always pan to those folks when we're watching the matches because they bring
Right.
the flavor to the tournament. But a lot of those folks are getting priced out at this point, and that's because FIFA has decided to institute dynamic pricing in the United States. Dynamic pricing kind of sounds neat. I like dynamic stuff in general, but when it comes to pricing tickets, it's actually terrible. It means that FIFA is basically trying to extract the maximum amount of money out of the ticket buyer. So prices are extraordinarily high right now. In terms of the tickets that have been purchased, the average ticket price is over $1,000 right now. Over $1,000 for one match. Like that to me is really high. They
Hmm.
might have maybe pushed it a little bit too far, and prices will probably come down right before the tournament. But that doesn't help the international fan who decided not to come to the tournament, either because the ticket prices were too high or they didn't want to get detained by ICE. It might allow some locals to get in at bargain basement prices at the very last minute. But that also undermines FIFA's claim that this tournament is designed to bring $30.5 billion of economic activity to North America. That's only predicated on the idea that a lot of these people are coming from abroad because tourists from abroad spend much more money than people just watching matches at home. You just go back home after your match. You don't rent a hotel and then go to dinner and all that stuff. So I'm hoping that we're going to see a decrease in prices for some of these matches. Certainly the ones involving teams, like Austria is not a big fan base here in the United States, for example. So they have some pretty low profile matches where you should be able to get a pretty cheap ticket. But Colombia, Portugal, I'd be surprised if you could get a ticket for under $2,000 to that match. And I'm really only talking about the tickets that FIFA sells. There's also the secondary market or the resale market that is very much unregulated in the United States. And that's where you really see these huge prices. And so FIFA actually has an incentive to just jack up the costs in the secondary market because for every ticket that's resold in the secondary market, FIFA grabs 15% from the buyer and 15% from the seller. So they want the ticket prices to go up through the roof in the secondary market because they're making bank off that stuff, FIFA is.
I see. What's your reaction to Mamdani? I think Mamdani stabilized the ticket pricing. How'd he even do that? What's this guy do? Is Mamdani a wizard, or are the rest of the politicians just not doing anything?
Well, Mamdani is a political wizard. He just seems like a very likable guy. I mean, she even charmed President Trump at one point. And I think it's worth mentioning Mamdani is a longtime soccer fan and supporter of Arsenal Football Club, and that's one of the first clubs that really embraced the world and signed players of color from around the world, the best players. And he talks about Mamdani does about how that drew him to Arsenal and gave him an extra love of football. So Mamdani, during his campaign, before he was elected as the mayor, he had this campaign to raise awareness of the issues that you and I are talking about today and these high ticket prices and how FIFA is basically siphoning money out of the community and putting it in their coffers in Switzerland. And more recently, he had a conversation with honchos at FIFA where he managed to squeegee around like 1,000 tickets for everyday New Yorkers at around $50 per ticket, which is very low price. He got 1,000 tickets. Now, by comparison, I think that's great, and I give him all credit to do that. It wasn't easy to do in this particular environment. But to put that in comparison to like recent World Cups, there'd be, the World Cup in Brazil, there was like 400,000 tickets at that price level. The South Africa World Cup in 2010, a huge portion of the tickets were at that price level. So FIFA has really ratcheted up its greed machine for this most recent World Cup. Thank goodness for Mamdani being willing to stand up to them and claw back some of it for everyday New Yorkers. But we're still talking about 1,000 tickets. And to your question, why didn't other leaders do this? I think that they should be asked that. Why didn't they do this? I mean, if Mamdani can do it, I know he's super charming and amazing, but like other leaders could have also said, look, we are hosting you. We're paying the costs for this event. And so we should get something out of it. And I think it's worth slowing down for a second and saying, cities are bearing the costs for this. This is one of those examples of socializing the costs and privatizing the benefits. FIFA, its corporate sponsors, its broadcast partners on television, they're going to walk off with a huge bag of money. And local cities and states that are funding the police, that are funding the medical teams that'll be there, that are fixing up their stadiums to make them FIFA ready, they're paying the costs. And now they're starting to wake up to that reality that they're actually going to probably end up in massive debt because of this thing. The least FIFA could do is give them some low price tickets for everyday working people.
Hmm. I'm just I'm trying to wrap my mind around. Well, they've always hosted at nation states that have had power over them. They've always siphoned money from the working class and put in their pockets.
Mhm.
They've always sold tickets. What's different? Like, what happened to FIFA culturally, ethically, morally, in the actual establishment? Was there a deep state establishment change within FIFA where the good guys left and now there's this new guy? And who is this president that you keep mentioning? Where did he pop out of? I know I threw a lot at you there.
Yeah, I mean, so let's start with the last thing. I mean, Gianni Infantino is a Swiss guy who he used to run UEFA, which is the group of European countries that are really powerful inside of the world of soccer. And back in 2015, there was this massive corruption scandal around then President Sepp Blatter. And Sepp Blatter was overseeing just like the suitcase of cash era. And you'd give broadcasters, broadcasters would give people in FIFA like huge amounts of money to get the broadcast rights. And there's all this money circulating illegally. Well, then Infantino takes over after that, where eventually Sepp Blatter had to retire because he was just under so much fire from the massive corruption. And some people actually even, went to jail over that corruption. But in strolls Infantino, smooth talking guy, says he's going to change soccer, make it better, and spread money around to everybody. But the same structural issues are at play. And the thing that's changed over time that I think is worth noting is that FIFA used to write contracts with the host country that were much better for the host country. All the way up through the 2006 World Cup in Germany, they were still giving a fair amount of the money from broadcasting and corporate sponsorship to the host country. That changed starting with South Africa in 2010. FIFA realized, you know what, we're not going to write the contracts in ways that help the host cities as much. We're going to write them in ways that benefit us. Now, that was during the Blatter era before Infantino, but Infantino was paying attention to the way things worked, and he hasn't changed a thing since then. If you compare to the last time the United States hosted the World Cup in 1994, they were getting much better contracts, the United States host cities back in 1994, than they're getting today. And so a lot has changed in terms of FIFA greed, basically, and a lack of knowledge in pushing back against the FIFA greed because of the desire to host this tournament. I mean, I got to say, the World Cup and also the Olympics, but the World Cup thrives on this myth that it's going to float everybody's economic boat, and it just doesn't do that. I mean, there are cold, sober academic economists who've looked at the 1994 World Cup in the United States and seen that out of the 13 host cities, 9 of them hemorrhaged money. Like it was a money loser in 1994, and the contracts were a
Really?
lot better in 94 than they are today.
Why was it a money loser?
Well, because there's this myth that just doesn't play out. I mean, the only place that I can think of that was a money winner, at least according to the economists, was the 2006 Germany World Cup, where there doesn't seem to be a massive deficit. I mean, this is just something that plagues both the Olympics and the World Cup. They have to spend, host cities and countries have to spend loads of money to get ready, to have FIFA ready stadiums. I mean, when I lived in Brazil, after the World Cup of 2014 and before the Olympics in 2016. And people were so mad in Brazil about how they got screwed by FIFA and how they had to spend so much money for the FIFA level stadiums. They wanted FIFA level healthcare, they kept saying in the streets at the protests. They wanted FIFA level schooling. But instead, the government, even under a fairly progressive government in Lula, gave money to FIFA thinking that it would be good for the country and for the world to see a country that's on the rise.
And in a critical moment where Americans are searching for the truth in every walk of their life, whether it's politics, spirituality, history, and everything in between, here at the Ansari podcast, we have built a place where ideas and thoughts are explored deeply. But the truth is, we can't do this alone. The Ansari team needs your help to sustain the show we have now and to take it to the next level to compete with mainstream media and beyond. We need the Ummah to invest in itself. Join us on our website or our Patreon. Helping us is like buying one pistachio latte a month, and wallahi, it makes all the difference. Thank you guys, and enjoy the show. So, what do you anticipate will begin to happen over the summer as the World Cup begins in the United States next week?
Well, I think no matter what, we're going to get some amazing soccer. I am concerned, though, about some of the conditions that the United States in particular is hosting this event in. And more specifically, I'm extraordinarily concerned about the role of immigration and customs enforcement. The acting head of ICE said that ICE would play a key role at this World Cup. They haven't said exactly what that key role will be, but there will be ICE at World Cup stadiums and in World Cup cities. So I'm concerned for everyday fans from around the world, especially racialized fans, black and brown fans, but not exclusively them, who come from countries who might have to face ICE in the streets. I'm also concerned about people who live in the United States already from various communities that are in the World Cup. Take Haiti, for example. People are really excited from Haiti that the World Cup, they're back in the World Cup. And so in places like New York, where you have huge populations of Haitians, they're going to hopefully come together. But my worry is that that's going to turn into sort of like a magnet for ICE to go into these communities that are not maybe in World Cup host cities and to perform raids there. On top of that, I'm also very concerned that you have the sort of emboldened MAGA crowd who is really feeling themselves under the President Trump regime here, who might cause harm to just fans having a good time. Last thing I'll say about this that I'm concerned about is there's a video out there of fans from Iraq who were traveling through Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on their way to Mexico to cheer on their team, Iraq, in the playoff match to see whether they would make it to the World Cup. Well, they did make it to the World Cup, and they were standing there in Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, cheering, waving their Iraqi flag as fans will do, big banners, just having fun. And some white guy just rolls through them and starts yelling invectives at them, screaming at them, ripping down their banner and saying things like, "You can't do that in this country." And that is what really kind of keeps me up at night, to be honest, is the fans that feel emboldened. And this, of course, not to go too far down the road, but, it's a very violent country, the United States, in terms of gun culture, one mass shooting a day. So those are the things that really keep me up at night, the sort of worst case scenarios. So here's what I'm hoping, okay? This is my most optimistic Jules Boykoff. And that is that people across this country will embrace the people from around the world and say, "Welcome to our country. We are very sorry for the xenophobic outlook that our federal government has adopted since President Trump took office. And there are people out there that don't support his immigration policies, don't support immigration and customs enforcement running through the streets with masks, looking like they just robbed a liquor store and then showed up to work. We don't support any of that. Welcome into our communities. That's my best case scenario.
Hmm.
Um, I do think you're right. There's going to be a wake up call for some folks who've never been to the United States before. I'm just thinking in terms of the transportation that you were mentioning. You know, a lot of folks from around the world will be used to quite nice transportation systems that they use at home, public transportation. They're just not going to have that in the United States in a lot of these host cities. There's going to be a lot of flying. There's going to be a lot of driving. And that's why this, as a side note, it's going to be the biggest carbon bomb of an event in the history of the World Cup. This is an absolute debacle in terms of climate change right now because everyone's going to have to fly around. We just don't have a good train system in the United States that can get people from city to city in the distances they need to travel in this massive country. And so, yes, I think there's going to be a wake up call for a lot of people, but I'm hopeful that everyday people in the United States will try to make folks feel welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know this, Mr. Boykoff, but people that, especially that were born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, if they weren't raised in America, they think that America is gold streets and paved, the streets are paved in gold, right? They look at it as a soap opera. They think that it's literally the 1950s still.
Mm.
That's where the perspective I'm coming from. That's where I'm like, yo, I really, because I don't know where you live, but right now I'm in the DMV area, DC area,
Mhm.
Washington DC, the capital of the world, right? And the metro is so it's not attractive in any way. If you look at just even the railway, you're just like, this looks
Mm.
like it should have been changed 100 years ago. So I was just sitting there like, oh man, I really don't even know how America's hosting this. I don't even feel the World Cup. What city are you in? Have you been feeling the World Cup? I can't even tell that it's happening next week.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, first of all, if you look at the DC metro system, it's probably one of the best that we have to offer for starters
Right.
compared to these other host cities. I used to live in DC and take the metro out to work in Virginia. And I normally live in Portland, Oregon, which is not a host city. But I've actually been outside of the United States since January. And I was in Toronto for a while, and there was not World Cup fever there at that point in the month of February. Then I was in Helsinki for a couple months. They're not even in the World Cup, so nobody was hardly talking about it. And then I was in Bosnia for from the end of April to June to just the beginning of this month. And there was a lot of excitement around the World Cup in Bosnia, I will say, and in part because of what I
Mm.
was talking about before. The country hasn't participated since 2014. People are really excited about the team. But I didn't meet anybody who was going to the actual World Cup, like traveling to the actual event. But people were definitely excited to be supporting it. So I am concerned that there's going to be trouble, but I'm also optimistic that people will bring their best selves to the United States and that people will be welcoming them when they get there. I certainly hope that's the case in Washington, D.C., where the area where you are.
Hmm. Do you think that FIFA is being used to increase the security state of the United States as it has done so for so many others? I think China utilized it more than anyone else in Russia.
Hosting sports mega events give national and local policing units and governments usually a once in a generation chance to multiply and militarize their weapon stocks, to get all sorts of special weapons and laws they'd never be able to get during normal political times because these sports mega events bring what some people call a state of exception where the normal rules of politics don't apply. And yes, it definitely happens in places like China and Russia. It also happens in places where I'm coming to you right now. I'm in Paris right now. And ahead of the 2024 Olympics, the parliament passed a special law that allowed for AI powered video surveillance to be used. They used the Olympics as the pretext, the reason, if you will, to institute this new law. It was supposed to sunset after the Olympics, but then people in parliament have been arguing, and the argument is ongoing as to whether they should extend it because now France is hosting the 2030 Winter Olympics. And so you're definitely onto something. I mean, it's not like these governments that host the World Cup and then ramp up the security infrastructure. It's not like they put all those, weapons back in the box and return them to the sender. They stay and they become part of normal policing, which, in the United States means racialized policing. And there's just so many examples of that. And, the one thing that President Trump has made clear is that he wants to hand over lots of security money for the World Cup and the Olympics. And it was part of that so-called Big Beautiful Bill. There was $1.6 billion that was allocated for things around security for these events. So that is one area where all of a sudden the U.S. federal government doesn't skimp, is the security, and you're onto something that it has ramifications for after the event goes away. They often used to say, like China made the argument when they were trying to host the Olympics in 2008 that, hey, if you let us host the Olympics, we'll become more democratic. Well, that, unfortunately didn't happen. But so it's not just though that hosting sports mega events doesn't make authoritarian countries more democratic. It's actually that countries that consider themselves to be democracies, they become more authoritarian by hosting the events because of the dynamics you're talking about around security.
Yeah, the cameras. I'm afraid of those camera installations because I remember how much China increased their cameras during their Beijing Olympics.
You're right. And also, Los Angeles has been talking about doing that for facial recognition systems for your tickets at the 2028 Olympics. So you kind of soft launch it in this sort of friendly celebration capitalism kind of way. Like, hey, it's just your ticket. It's kind of cool, right? They scan your face and that's your ticket. Your face is your ticket. Sounds kind of cool, high tech. But boy, the implications, like who collects that biometric data, who spreads it around, where does it go, how can you trust it, what are the private companies, Palantir and so on, that are working with the government to collect that data. There's a lot of open questions there. So it's China, but I would say it's also the United States. That's one thing I think I'm going to keep a close eye on moving toward Los Angeles in the 2028 Olympics is what they do with the facial recognition systems or whether they get stopped because of activism on the ground.
On a bright side, real quick, who do you think will win this World Cup?
Well, I don't think they're going to win, but my heart is with Bosnia. I just spent more than a month in Sarajevo, and when I was leaving Sarajevo, the team just happened to be in the airport on the exact same day as me. So I just want to shout out Bosnia, who beat Italy in a shootout to make it in sort of miracle fashion to this World Cup. How happy I would be if they did well at this World Cup. So go Bosnia for starters.
Let's
Who do
go.
I actually think with my head is going to win it? I mean, I think France has a really good team who's in form right now. So I would put them at the top of my list. And I'd also put Spain up there. They have experienced players who know how to win tournaments. So those would be my two picks to win it.
Yeah,
Do you have a
it's
favorite yourself?
no, honestly, I don't watch that much sport. I'm just gonna root for um any team that I like. I had historically teams that I like, so it's kind of based off of the match. I'm one of those.
Yes, yes. Are you an
Yeah.
underdog guy? I'm an underdog. I like to go with the
Yes.
underdog
I'll
every time.
literally like choose 30 minutes into the game. Like, wait, I like how these guys are.
Nice.
Who do you think is the best player coming into the World Cup this year?
Well, I mean, I think one of the best is Ousmane Dembele. He plays for France, and he plays for Paris Saint-Germain, the team that just won the Champions League final over Arsenal, and he's a very good player who's in good form. So I think he's a fun one to watch for sure. I'd put him right up at the top of my list. You mentioned before Messi and Ronaldo, and you took the Ronaldo side, and I'm sure plenty of your listeners and viewers will take the Messi side. Like, God bless both those guys, but neither of them are like at that top level anymore, despite a lot of the hype around both of them. And in fact, actually, there's some soccer fans, quite a few of them actually, including myself, think that it might be a hamper on Portugal. They might feel pressure like they have to play Ronaldo when they actually have guys that probably are quite a bit better and younger and fitter and can and do more things in the field than he can at this stage. But they might feel they have to play him because he's this megastar. So yeah, and then of course Kylian Mbappe from France is also one of those players in pretty good form right now. A third one, and I'll stop because we could talk about this for days, but
No,
a
go ahead.
third one from Norway is a guy named Erling Haaland, who is only 25 years old, scores buckets of goals for Manchester City, and is pretty excited to be in this World Cup because it's not something that happens every 4 years with Norway. And he's in pretty good form right now as well. So, those are some of the guys that I would definitely keep an eye on here. You'll notice I didn't say anybody from the United States. I mean, I think most people that follow world football will tell you that the United States probably doesn't have a top 100 player in the world at this stage, and so it'll have to be a team effort if you're rooting for Team USA.
Yeah, it's strange. The United States has some of the best high school and college programs in the world for soccer, and then some of the worst for professional soccer. It's an interesting combo there. Who would you say is your fourth and fifth? I liked your top three so far.
Really? Oh gosh, this let's see. Um, well, there's the player Rodri from Spain, who's really he's just one of those guys who seems timeless, and he plays the deep pivot. He plays like a six, and he does a lot of the dirty work. I like this sort of unsung hero of the squad, and so I'm behind him. He also came off a pretty serious injury, so maybe it's just an old guy rooting for a relatively old guy. But I would say I like watching him. I mean, I mean, gosh, who else would I say? Uh, who's in
What
good
do you think of
form?
Lamine Yamal?
Oh
He's
my
is he?
gosh, thank you for mentioning Lamine Yamal. And I really hope that his legs are feeling good by the time the World Cup rolls around. Yes, thank you. Let's put him in the bucket. He is so exciting. And you mentioned before the issue around Israel Palestine in regards to FIFA. When Barcelona won La Liga recently, the Spanish highest league, during the celebrations, he was on top of the team bus, moving through the city with all the throngs of fans, and he was waving his Palestinian flag. Lamine
Yeah.
Yamal is Muslim, and he stood up for Palestine. And just to put a pin in that for a second, that was something that was really interesting about the last World Cup in Qatar was that Palestine wasn't one of the 32 teams that played, but they were like sort of like the 33rd team. And I'm going to be really interested to see this summer, as even though Palestine didn't qualify for the tournament, whether they'll be the 49th team, if you will, where last time Morocco was the players were waving the Palestinian flag when they were celebrating their victories. And so that's another one of those
Mhm.
things that you mentioning Lamine Yamal really made me think of is that I'll be watching whether Palestine has a presence at this World Cup, even though their players won't be on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, how's the Morocco team looking? They were amazing last time around.
Yeah, they had a great run, and usually those kind of runs can lead to future success because guys then had the experience together at the highest level in the pressure cooker. And they certainly have some top players. I mean, they've got a player who plays for Paris Saint-Germain right now, who just won the Champions League, who's considered probably the best outside right back in the entire world. And yeah, I think that they could be good. I mean, that's kind of like the Croatia thing. Like a lot of people think Croatia is sort of similar in the sense that their experience in previous tournaments and their success in previous tournaments with a core group of guys has given them a lot of success moving forward. So some
Well,
people are
Lamine Yamal's playing for Morocco, right?
no, he's playing for Spain. Yeah, he's playing for Spain. Lamine
What?
Yamal.
He's Moroccan, isn't he?
He's playing
He
for
is
Spain.
Moroccan. I know he's Moroccan. That's crazy. He's playing for Spain. What about the other guy that's Moroccan? He played for PSG.
Yeah, why am I bring? It's not. I'm blanking out his name right
He
now.
definitely plays for Morocco. I mean, he literally was
Oh,
on.
he
He
does.
That's where
Yeah,
he got
yeah,
his
no,
fame.
that's the guy that I was talking about. He definitely does. I'm just
Yeah,
totally spacing on his name right now because
but
I'm
they
tired.
would have been insane if Lamine played with them, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Lamine.
why would he play with Spain? I'll just say this about Spain. I love you. I know you ranked them number two, but they're always so amazing on paper and then terrible in reality. I don't know why he would go with them. Like Morocco has all the fight, all the OKC, Oklahoma City kind of energy. I don't know why he wouldn't go with them.
Well, hey, you got to get him on the show and ask him
Oh, no.
that question. That would be a major score if you could get Lamine Yamal. I mean, he's one of those up and coming players that all love to that guy. I just hope he stays healthy. Another one of the younger players that I'm really interested in is this Alphonse Davies, who plays for Canada, and his club plays his
Oh,
club football at Bayern Munich, and he too, like Lamine Yamal, is coming off an injury. And is questionable as to whether he'll be ready for the first match. But that points backward to what we were talking about before, that a lot of these guys, like the best footballers in the world, they are coming out of an intense season where they play more games than ever. Again, it goes back to the fact that FIFA and UEFA, the world governing body for soccer in Europe, they are trying to squeeze every last dime out of these guys' labor. And so they're coming out of an intense season where some teams have played like 60 games, even more, and now they're going straight into the World Cup. So some of the players that are playing all these matches are walking in with injuries. So I think it looks like Alphonse Davies will be okay for the World Cup, but that's one of those things to consider. So that also means that countries that don't have players playing in those top leagues, but got a little bit of rest after the season, they could be in a little bit better form and maybe not get injured during the tournament. That can just change everything. I mean, injuries can change the trajectory of a team at the World Cup really quickly.
yeah. Who do you think are could be surprising underdogs? Can you tell me your top three surprising may end up winning teams?
I would say Japan. They've done a really nice job building.
Really?
Yeah, they have built up a really strong domestic league, and now they send players all around the world to play in the best leagues. And so, well, I mean, Japan is a legitimate power now when it comes to world football. They play a beautiful game as well, like a high skill game, and they're just fun to watch. Like even if they don't win, they're usually fun to watch. So I would put Japan in that category.
They
I would
also have a player, I believe he's Japanese origin, that plays in one of the European teams, and he's like top in the world.
Yeah, they have plenty. Yeah, they got a bunch of guys playing all around the world in the top leagues. So, Japan is they've and I would argue that comes out of having a strong domestic league. It's called the J League, and giving opportunities to young players to come up through that system. Another team I would point to is Turkey, and that's a team that's in the United States group, and they are very strong and they are underrated big time. And they just barely
Really?
squeaked into the tournament. So I think Turkey is another one. Another I have to say
Why
is
Turkey?
well, they just have again. It's like the recipe for all these teams is they have players playing in the best leagues around the world. The best league for football is the English Premier League, and so if you're playing in that league, you're playing against the best of the best week in and week out, and that helps you as an individual player, but it also then in turn helps your country when you're playing for them. And that actually
Who do you
points to
think Turkey's best player is?
Guler, I would say. Guler is right. Guler. He's right up there in terms of best players. I
Mm.
think he might be the surprise young player, one of the young players in the tournament. But we haven't talked about England, and that might make some people mad. England sort of is known for choking at these international tournaments, but based on what I was just talking about, the fact that they have the best league and around 70 players from England play in the Premier League week in and week out, that has made them better over time. And they have a really good goal scorer in Harry Kane, who I probably should have mentioned among the very best players in the best form right now. He usually plays for Bayern Munich. So I don't happen to cheer for England too much. No offense to my friends in England, but I know that they have a lot of fans around the world because so many of their players are famous from the Premier League.
Mm. Okay, so your top three to win it was France, Spain. I think you only gave me France and Spain, and then your
And I'm going to give
surprising
you my heart.
who?
I'm throwing my heart in the top three, kind of as a joke, but I'm putting Bosnia up there. Actually, I
Uh,
don't think they're going to win, but it's France, Spain, and Bosnia, and then yeah, my surprises would be Senegal, Turkey, and Japan for sure.
Senegal, Turkey, and Japan. Okay. Well, what about top three? If it wasn't Bosnia, who would it be?
Um,
For who you think would win?
Well, I have to say if you're going by the betting out there, and I don't want to really talk about betting, but like a lot of people have England for the tournament. So, if you're
Ah, okay, okay.
okay.
Just for because we got a couple, for our Middle Eastern audience, how are the Middle Eastern countries looking? Any of them other than Morocco? Obviously, we got Morocco doing well, and
Well, I
Turkey,
mean,
you said.
actually, I'm not just saying this to you, but Egypt could look good this summer. You got Mo Salah, and you got other players that are playing in the Premier League, and so like that could be a surprise team for a lot of folks. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm rooting for Jordan. Their camp is in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from. So how could I not cheer for them? So yeah, I think those are the teams that I'm probably most interested in. You'll notice almost every team that I root for has some kind of like political thing. So as the political scientist in me, I can't help it.
But yeah, no, obviously I'm rooting for Egypt as well. Omar Marmoush, Mo Salah. I hope they do well. For some reason, Mo Salah doesn't do well with Egypt. Omar Marmoush does a lot better. I think it's because of the chemistry. I hope they get it together. But for many people, they've been living under the guise of the inflation, the war, the Iran war, the Gaza genocide, the Ukraine Russia war, the Trump tariffs, all of these. Living under Trump is living under a dangerous circus.
Hmm.
So, this is a moment of maybe delusional relief for people.
Hmm.
And I always wonder, like, when I'm sitting around, every World Cup is the only time that I see all of my family together and we're all watching one thing and one's jumping and screaming and laughing and high-fiving and going, I told you so. It's a completely different
Hmm.
dynamic. And for a moment, you forget about the troubles of the world. One of the reservations I had about filming this episode was just that. It's like, man, I always talk about the troubles of the world. What now with the World Cup and FIFA? Should I really be the podcast that again talks about the troubles of FIFA and then makes people feel guilty about watching it? I don't think we should be feeling guilty about watching it. I don't think we should live this life of, well, the elites control everything and the elites are horrible, so screw everything. I'm not, drinking soda. I'm not, well, I mean, I don't drink soda, but like, don't live basically.
Hmm.
Um, how do you balance between those two?
Well, I mean, welcome to my life, young man. I would say for starters, I think that is what I've been dealing with for a long time. But for me, it really does boil down to the fact that I do believe in the power of sports. I do believe in the power of soccer. And I've seen it build community. I've seen it bring people together in ways that help them know each other better and allows them to pivot out into political struggles around justice. I've seen it, I've been involved with it. And I know that sport is worth fighting for. And I'm hoping that a lot of people this summer will have the scales fall from their eyes when it comes to the people that run the sport and stand up for these, what I would think we should be talking about as worker athletes. The players on the field, I know many of them are millionaires and everything, but not all of them. And many of them are coming right out of long seasons. And their union called FIFPro, the union, the international union for these soccer players, these football players, they're concerned about the high temperatures that they'll be playing in, the fact they're coming out of an intense season. I think it's a moment to really slow down and have conversations with thoughtful people who care about the future of the world, and we can move it through that lens of soccer and fight for a more fair terrain through football that can then move beyond football and out into wider struggles for justice in our communities. So I've seen it happen in places like Vancouver, Canada, and I think it can happen in other places around the United States, Mexico, and Canada this summer.
What do you think is the future of all of this? Like, if everything we say gets solved, what does the World Cup actually look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that for starters, it just has to be smaller. I know I just mentioned this issue of climate change that unfortunately nobody's talking about out there, but the fact that these events have gotten so big, this tournament this year is the biggest World Cup ever. It's got 48 teams instead of the usual 32 teams. And all those people, all those fans flying over, and then all those people flying around the country to get from game to game, that is this sporty carbon bomb that I mentioned before. So I think the future's got to be slimming down this model so it's not so massive. But that entails having FIFA make that decision to slim it down. And they're not changing anything soon. And so I think I wish I could be more optimistic with you right now in terms of FIFA reform. I think that it's really important that journalists are on this. There's some incredible investigative journalism happening around FIFA, and we need absolutely more of it. We need to be able to see FIFA's books, like their money books, and see how this money is getting transferred. We need much more transparency. I mentioned before a campaign that anybody can get involved in. I'm going to sign my name onto it. I'm on the advisory board of this group called Fair Square, and so I support this campaign entirely, this class action suit against FIFA for violating its own rules. So if you can get a lot of people on that and attention around that, I think that's the step forward. But if we don't do those things that I'm talking about, think about climate change, try to have a class action suit, take this to the European Parliament where you might get a little bit of leverage over FIFA. We're looking at the continuation of this system into the future. I mean, let's not forget there are three countries hosting the World Cup in 2030, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, and then it moves to Saudi Arabia in 2034. And that's going to be a massive carbon bomb because it's going to be hot there. They're going to have to use air conditioning, not to mention all the stadiums that need to be built there. So this is the moment to start making changes in the FIFA model. The problem is the people in charge at FIFA right now do not appear to be capable of it. We need to clean house, get them out, and build this back up from the ground.
Hmm. On, leaving the elites for a second, because, oh man, I'm so tired of talking about them for the last couple years. Where do you think, the regular working class, the regular population of humans, the people of the world, how do you think they're feeling coming into FIFA? How are you feeling? How's your family feeling about this? Are you guys excited for this summer?
Hmm.
Are you going to any? You said you're not going to any games?
Yes, I'm not going to attend any matches. I'll be in Toronto for the month of July, and there is a match when I'm there. But again, I'm not going to give FIFA any of my money. I'll actually be outside the stadium. There's going to be some protests that day, and I'm going to follow what's going on there. I'm kind of more
Hmm.
interested in that. Um, so, and that's something we haven't really talked about. There is a group of the Anti-Fascist Football Coalition in the United States that is going to be engaging in protests at various host cities. There's also a group in Los Angeles called No Olympics LA that has been opposing the Los Angeles Olympics since 2017. They actually made this, used a 3D printer to make their own FIFA World Cup champion trophy. They're calling it the FIFA War Cup, and they spattered it in fake blood, and they're taking it to different protests. So I think that they are trying to jumpstart some of the same kind of conversations that we're having today and really focusing on everyday working class people that you're asking about. I also think that everyday people will be trying to engage the tournament by watching it, even if they can't afford a ticket. And I don't want to undersell how it can really bring people together. I mean, it really does bring communities together. It jumpstarts conversations. Before I started writing about the politics of sports, I used to write about the suppression of political dissent in North America. Like, how does the government and media suppress political dissent? Well, it was kind of hard, honestly, to start a conversation with somebody about that stuff that would go very far, especially if that person didn't hold my political beliefs. But the thing about sports, and especially soccer, the world's most popular sport, is that you can sort of start having a conversation about soccer when you're at the coffee shop or the pub watching the match with somebody who's very different from you politically, and then kind of move into the politics, move into the FIFA Greed Machine, and actually have a pretty good, robust conversation with people who you don't really agree with much else around politics, but it can be a sort of foundation for future, solidarity, even potentially moving forward. I mean, I think that's one of the really interesting elements about sports and soccer in particular. And I'm hoping we see quite a lot of that this summer.
I know you gotta go, Professor Jules. Thank you so much for joining the Unsaudi podcast and accommodating our time today. Do you have any final thoughts before you head off?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a joy to get this chance to speak with you, and we'll have to touch base during the World Cup and see how our teams are doing. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Professor Jules Boykoff, the author of Red Card. You can go check out his book online. I think it's available on Amazon as well, isn't it?
I believe it might be. You can get it at a discount straight from the publisher. They'll send it right to you. OR Books, based in New York City.
Thank you so much, Professor. Have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoy your summer, enjoy your World Cup, and thank you guys for listening to the Ansari podcast.